My name's Riley, I'm 31, and the day I got promoted at my downtown Chicago marketing firm was the same day my marriage quietly started dying. At the time, though, I thought it was the beginning of my revenge era. I just didn't know revenge was going to be against the two people I trusted most. My husband, Ethan, had always been weird about my career. He'd say he supported me, but every time I succeeded he'd crack little jokes like, "Don't forget who made dinner while you chased your big dreams." I laughed it off because that's what good wives do, we smooth things over and pretend sarcasm isn't resentment wearing a hoodie. Then there was my best friend, Chloe. We'd been tight since college, girls' trips, wine nights, trauma bonding over terrible exes. She was basically family. When I landed the promotion, she hugged me harder than anyone and told me she was proud. Looking back now, I swear her smile had this tiny crack in it, like a mask slipping for half a second. The new role meant longer hours and more responsibility. I worked closely with a senior account manager named Marcus, charming, funny, ridiculously good at reading people. Office gossip said he flirted with everyone, but with me he kept it professional, at least at first. He became my work partner, my late-night brainstorm buddy, the person who understood my stress when nobody else did. Meanwhile, Ethan started pulling away. He'd stay up gaming instead of talking to me, stopped asking about my day, and got weirdly protective of his phone. Every time I asked what was wrong, he'd flip it back on me, say I was too busy, too corporate, too different now. I told myself it was just an adjustment period. Marriage has phases, right? One Friday night I came home early to surprise him with takeout from his favorite burger spot. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. His car was there, but he wasn't answering when I called his name. I figured he was in the shower or wearing headphones again. Then I saw 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. My stomach dropped. I heard whispering from the bedroom, a familiar laugh that made my skin crawl because I knew it before my brain even caught up. Chloe's laugh. Light, breathy, unmistakable. My best friend. My sister in everything except blood. I froze in the hallway like my body had forgotten how to exist. The door wasn't fully closed. Just enough for shadows to move behind it. Enough for me to hear Ethan's voice, softer than it had been with me in months, telling her she deserved better. Telling her he wished things were different. Something inside me didn't break. It calcified. I backed out silently, left the food on the counter, and walked straight back to my car. No screaming. No crying. Just this cold, steady clarity settling into my bones like armor. That night I didn't confront them. I didn't call. I didn't text. Instead I sat in a 24-hour diner, drinking terrible coffee and writing a list in my notes app. Proof. Money. Lawyer. Revenge. Because if my husband and my best friend thought they were about to ruin my life, they had no idea who they'd just created. Most people imagine betrayal as this explosive moment, screaming, crying, throwing phones across the room like a reality show meltdown. But me? I went completely silent. Cold. Focused. The second I heard Ethan and Chloe together, something inside me switched from heartbreak to strategy. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a cheap hotel near the diner and spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every weird moment from the past few months. Chloe texting me asking when I'd be late at work. Ethan suddenly caring about how she was doing emotionally. The way they both acted overly friendly around each other, like actors overcompensating during a bad performance. I felt stupid, but also weirdly calm. By morning, I had a plan. Step 1, act normal. When I walked into our apartment the next day, Ethan was on the couch pretending to watch TV. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. He looked nervous, not guilty enough to confess, but definitely on edge. I kissed his cheek, asked about his night, and watched his shoulders relax when he realized I wasn't confronting him. That's when I knew they thought they got away with it. And honestly, that worked in my favor. Over the next week I became the world's best undercover wife. I laughed at his jokes, cooked dinner, even asked Chloe to hang out like nothing was wrong. Every fake smile felt like swallowing glass, but I needed time. I needed proof. I started small, screenshots of texts popping up on Ethan's phone when he left it unattended, photos of hotel receipts he forgot to delete from his email, voice recordings of late-night calls he thought I couldn't hear through the bedroom wall. Turns out cheaters get sloppy when they think they're smarter than you. Work became my escape. Marcus noticed I was quieter but didn't push. Instead, he'd bring me coffee during late meetings and crack dumb jokes until I actually laughed. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. One night after work drinks with the team, Chloe texted me asking if I could cover for her with Ethan, said she told her boyfriend she was staying at my place. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Sure girl, I got you." That's when the final piece of my plan clicked into place. If they wanted lies, I'd give them lies wrapped in consequences. I scheduled a consultation with a divorce lawyer during my lunch break. I moved part of my paycheck into a private account Ethan didn't know existed. I gathered bank statements showing he'd sent Chloe thousands over the past year, money we were supposedly saving for a house. Every new discovery hardened me more. By the end of the week, I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was building a case. A future. An exit strategy so clean they wouldn't even see it coming. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes it turns you into someone unstoppable. And I was just getting started. Revenge doesn't always start with fire. Sometimes it starts with exhaustion, and one person noticing you're barely holding it together. That person, for me, was Marcus. We were deep into a massive client campaign that had everyone in the office running on caffeine and bad decisions. Late nights turned into early mornings, and somehow Marcus became the only person I could stand being around. He never pried into my personal life, never asked why I looked like I hadn't slept in weeks. He just existed in this calm, steady way that made chaos feel manageable. One night after everyone else left, we were sitting in a conference room surrounded by empty takeout containers. I must have zoned out because he slid a bottle of water toward me and said, "You've got that I'm fine but actually dying inside face." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in days, and it hit me how starved I was for genuine connection. Not fake concern like Ethan suddenly pretending to be attentive when he felt guilty. Not Chloe's sugar-coated lies. Just honest human interaction. I didn't tell Marcus everything. Just that my marriage was complicated. That trust felt like a joke lately. He nodded like he understood without needing details. We started spending more time together outside of work, group happy hours, team lunches, random coffee breaks that somehow turned into long conversations about life. Nothing inappropriate at first. Just two coworkers bonding over stress and sarcasm. But emotional lines blur fast when you're already wounded. One Friday evening, the office hosted a rooftop celebration for landing a huge client. Music, cheap champagne, everyone pretending corporate life was glamorous. Marcus and I ended up leaning against the railing watching the skyline glow under city lights. The wind whipped my hair around, and for a second I forgot about betrayal, secrets, revenge, everything. He asked me if I was happy. Such a simple question, but it hit like a punch to the chest. I hesitated too long, and that silence said more than words ever could. I used to be, I admitted. He didn't push further. Just stood there with me, shoulder brushing mine, close enough to feel steady but not invasive. Safe. Warm. Real. And then, he kissed me. Soft. Careful. Like he was asking permission even after it happened. I should have pulled away immediately. I was still technically married. I was still planning a divorce. I was still collecting evidence against my cheating husband. But instead I stood there frozen, not because I was shocked, but because for the first time in months, I felt wanted without lies attached. We broke apart quickly, both breathing hard. "I'm sorry," he said. That was probably crossing a line. And yeah, it was. But lines had already been obliterated in my life. My husband was sleeping with my best friend. My marriage was a performance. My loyalty felt like a joke. So instead of running, I kissed him back. That was the moment my story shifted from victim to something far more dangerous. Because now I wasn't just planning my escape. I was building a brand new life, and it came with secrets of its own. After the kiss with Marcus, I expected guilt to hit me like a freight train. Instead, I felt awake. Not proud. Not innocent. Just painfully aware that my life had turned into a battlefield where loyalty meant nothing and survival meant everything. I told myself it was temporary. A distraction while I finalized my escape plan. But Marcus became more than that, he became the version of connection I had been starving for. He listened when I talked. He didn't make me feel small for being ambitious. He didn't roll his eyes when I shared ideas or dreams. Compared to Ethan's cold distance, Marcus felt like stepping into sunlight after months of gray skies. Meanwhile, at home, the lies kept piling up. Ethan suddenly started acting overly affectionate, random flowers, surprise dinners, fake apologies for being distant lately. It was almost laughable. I knew exactly where that guilt came from. Every time he hugged me, I wondered if he'd just left Chloe's bed hours earlier. Chloe, on the other hand, leaned harder into our friendship. She'd invite me out for drinks, gossip like nothing had changed, and complain about her toxic situationship, code for my husband. Listening to her vent about him while she pretended to be my biggest supporter felt like psychological warfare. But I played my role perfectly. I smiled. I listened. I nodded like a supportive friend while secretly recording every conversation. Every time she mentioned money he gave her. Every time she bragged about how emotionally connected they were. My evidence folder was growing faster than my patience. Then came the night everything escalated. I got home earlier than expected from work after a cancelled meeting. The apartment was quiet again, eerily familiar. My heart didn't even race this time, it just felt numb. I walked in silently and heard voices from the balcony. Ethan and Chloe, laughing softly like teenagers sneaking around. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I grabbed my phone and hit record. Their conversation made my stomach twist. They talked about future plans, about how eventually they'd figure things out, about how I was too busy to notice anything anyway. Chloe joked that I was married to my job, and Ethan didn't defend me. He agreed. That was the moment something inside me snapped into perfect clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion or emotional vulnerability. This was betrayal wrapped in long-term planning. They weren't just cheating, they were rewriting my life behind my back while smiling to my face. I stepped onto the balcony suddenly, acting surprised to see her there. They both froze, guilty expressions flashing across their faces before morphing into fake casual smiles. I played along, joked about the weather, even offered wine like the world's most unbothered host. Inside though? I was already 5 steps ahead. That night after Chloe left, Ethan tried to initiate intimacy, something he hadn't done in months. I pretended to be tired and rolled away from him, staring into the darkness while he fell asleep. Because now I knew the full truth. And revenge? Revenge was no longer just an idea in my notes app. It was becoming a carefully constructed masterpiece. And they still had no clue who they were really dealing with. By the time I reached the point of silent balcony recordings and fake wine nights, I wasn't just angry, I was strategic. Emotionally, I'd already checked out of my marriage. Legally though? I needed to make sure I walked away stronger, not broken. My lawyer, Denise, was the kind of woman who could slice through nonsense with a single raised eyebrow. The first time I laid everything out, the cheating, the financial transfers to Chloe, the recordings, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You're not here for revenge. You're here for leverage." And honestly? That line rewired my brain. She helped me build a step-by-step exit plan. Separate finances quietly. Secure my personal documents. Gather proof of marital funds being used outside the relationship. Every task felt like placing another brick in a fortress around my future. At home, I continued my Oscar-worthy performance as the supportive wife. I laughed at Ethan's stories. I pretended to believe his excuses. I even encouraged him to spend time with friends, code for giving him more opportunities to dig his own legal grave. Chloe kept playing her double role too, my confidant by day, my husband's secret partner by night. Sometimes she'd cry to me about how lonely she felt, and I'd nod sympathetically while remembering the recordings saved on my phone. The emotional whiplash should have destroyed me, but instead it hardened me. Meanwhile, Marcus and I crossed deeper into dangerous territory. What started as stolen kisses turned into late-night hotel meetups after work events. He knew my marriage was ending but didn't know the full chaos behind it. With him, I felt powerful, desired, respected, alive. But I also knew I was walking a thin line between healing and becoming someone I didn't fully recognize anymore. One afternoon, Denise dropped a bombshell during a meeting. Ethan's recent transfers to Chloe, thousands of dollars over the past year, counted as misuse of shared marital assets. That meant I could legally claim a larger financial settlement during the divorce. For the first time since discovering their affair, I smiled genuinely. Revenge wasn't screaming or public humiliation. It was walking away with my independence intact while they dealt with the consequences of their own lies. The final piece of my plan came together when Denise suggested documenting emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, the fake affection, the long-term deception. Every recorded conversation, every text message, every financial trail painted a picture that was impossible to deny. By the end of that week, I had everything ready. Proof of cheating. Proof of financial betrayal. Proof of emotional manipulation. All that remained was timing. And timing was going to be perfect. Because their biggest mistake wasn't cheating. It was underestimating the woman they thought they were quietly destroying. Every revenge story needs a stage. Mine came wrapped in fairy lights, champagne glasses, and a rooftop view of downtown Chicago, my official promotion celebration. I invited coworkers, mutual friends, and of course, Ethan and Chloe. They both showed up looking like they owned pieces of my life, smiling like they were proud of me. The irony was almost poetic. By then my divorce paperwork was finalized and signed but ready. Denise told me the most powerful moment in any betrayal wasn't when you found out the truth. It was when you controlled when everyone else learned it. So I smiled. I hosted. I played the role of successful wife living her best corporate dream. Marcus was there too, keeping a respectful distance like we agreed. To everyone else, we were just coworkers celebrating a big win. Only we knew about the quiet messages exchanged earlier that day, encouragement, strength, the reminder that I deserved better than the chaos waiting at home. Halfway through the party, Ethan wrapped an arm around my waist like the perfect supportive husband. Chloe clinked her glass and made a toast about strong women balancing career and love, her voice dripping with fake admiration. I almost laughed out loud at the performance. But instead I raised my own glass. Before we get too drunk, I said casually, I want to thank the two people who taught me the most about loyalty this year. The room quieted. Ethan smiled proudly. Chloe beamed like she was about to get a best friend shout-out. I connected my phone to the speaker system. And hit play. The balcony recording filled the rooftop, their whispered plans, their jokes about me being too busy to notice, their soft promises to figure things out together someday. Conversations they thought were private now echoed through a crowd of stunned faces. Ethan's arm dropped from my waist instantly. Chloe's smile shattered like glass hitting concrete. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there calmly, letting silence do the heavy lifting. When the audio ended, I looked directly at them and said, "Thank you both for reminding me exactly who you are." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few coworkers stared at Ethan like he was a stranger. One of our mutual friends shook their head and walked away without saying a word. Ethan tried to talk, excuses spilling out, claims that things weren't what they sounded like. Chloe looked like she might faint, tears streaking down her face as she begged me to listen. But I was done listening. I handed Ethan an envelope, divorce papers neatly printed, highlighted, undeniable. His hands shook as he took them. I turned to Chloe and simply said, "You can keep him. I'm done sharing my life with people who treat loyalty like a joke." Then I grabbed my purse, nodded to Marcus, who looked equal parts proud and stunned, and walked out of the party with my head high. No screaming match. No dramatic meltdown. Just truth, delivered at exactly the right moment. And as the elevator doors closed behind me, I realized something powerful. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I felt free. Walking out of that rooftop party felt cinematic, like I was the main character finally choosing herself. The city lights blurred past the car windows as Marcus drove me away from the chaos. I expected to feel powerful, unstoppable, maybe even victorious. Instead, when the adrenaline faded, exhaustion hit me like a truck. My phone exploded with notifications. Friends asking what just happened. Coworkers sending supportive messages. Unknown numbers trying to call, probably Ethan, probably Chloe, probably both desperate to control the narrative before it destroyed them completely. I silenced everything. Marcus pulled over near the lakefront and handed me a coffee without saying a word. We sat there in silence watching waves crash against the concrete shoreline. Finally he asked softly, "You okay?" And that's when I broke, not in a dramatic sobbing meltdown, but in quiet tears that slipped out before I could stop them. Months of pretending, planning, smiling through betrayal, all of it poured out at once. I thought I'd feel stronger, I admitted. "You are strong," he said. "But strong doesn't mean untouched." That line stuck with me. The next morning reality came crashing in. Ethan had already emailed a long apology, half excuses, half attempts to shift blame onto my career, my distance, my supposed emotional unavailability. Chloe sent paragraphs begging for forgiveness, claiming she never meant for it to go this far, like betrayal was some accidental road trip she couldn't stop. I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I met Denise and officially filed the divorce paperwork. Watching my signature hit the final page felt surreal, like cutting the last rope tying me to a life that no longer existed. But revenge comes with consequences too. Office gossip spread like wildfire. Even though most people supported me, some whispered about how dramatic the party reveal was. A few coworkers avoided Marcus and me, assuming we'd been involved longer than we admitted. HR scheduled a casual conversation about workplace boundaries, reminding us to keep things professional going forward. And emotionally? I felt hollow. The house felt empty without Ethan's presence, not because I missed him, but because silence forced me to face how much of my identity had been wrapped around being someone's wife, someone's best friend. Without those roles, I didn't fully recognize myself anymore. One evening I came home to find a box of my belongings Chloe had dropped off, old photos, friendship bracelets, random memories from years of loyalty that suddenly felt fake. I stared at them for a long time before sealing the box shut and sliding it into the closet. No dramatic burning ceremony. No rage-fueled speeches. Just quiet acceptance that some chapters end without closure. But underneath the grief, there was still that steady fire. Because the fallout wasn't the end of my story. It was just the messy middle, the part where revenge fades and real healing, real transformation, begins. A week after the rooftop fallout, the drama should have been over. Divorce filed. Lies exposed. Lines drawn. But betrayal has a way of leaving behind little landmines you don't even know exist, and one of those was about to explode in a way none of us expected. It started with an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, "You deserve to know the full truth." Normally I would have deleted it, assuming it was just more chaos from Ethan or Chloe trying to manipulate me again. But something about the wording felt different, colder, more calculated. I opened it expecting drama and instead found screenshots, dozens of them. Private group chats. Work messages. Photos. Turns out Ethan and Chloe weren't just sneaking around behind my back, They'd been trash-talking me publicly in a small friend circle for months. Jokes about my long work hours. Comments about how I was emotionally unavailable. Even worse, they'd hinted that my promotion was only possible because I flirted my way up the ladder. My hands shook reading it. This wasn't just cheating anymore. This was character assassination, rewriting my story while pretending to support me in person. The email ended with a simple note: I stayed quiet too long. I'm sorry. L. I had no idea who L was. But I suddenly understood why certain acquaintances had been distant lately, why some mutual friends stopped reaching out months before the party. Ethan and Chloe had been quietly shaping a narrative where I was the villain long before I exposed them. Old me would have reacted emotionally, posted screenshots online, started a public war. But revenge had already taught me patience, strategy, timing. Instead, I forwarded everything straight to Denise. She called me within the hour. This helps your case, she said. Defamation, emotional manipulation, and proof they plan to isolate you socially. Don't respond publicly yet. So I stayed quiet. But silence didn't mean weakness. Meanwhile, Ethan's reputation was unraveling on its own. People who heard the rooftop recording started connecting dots: unpaid debts, suspicious behavior, stories that no longer matched reality. Chloe disappeared from social events completely. Rumor was she'd lost her own relationship after the truth came out. Work became my safe zone again. Marcus kept things professional in public but grounded me privately, reminding me that the lies said more about them than about me. Still, part of me felt exposed in a new way. Not just betrayed romantically, but humiliated socially. One night I reread those screenshots over and over, letting the anger burn through me. They didn't just cheat, they tried to erase my worth while smiling in my face. And that's when I realized something important. Revenge wasn't finished yet. Not because I needed to destroy them, life was already doing that, but because I deserved to reclaim my narrative completely. And this time, I wasn't going to do it quietly. For weeks I stayed silent while rumors twisted through social circles like bad gossip vines. Ethan and Chloe's lies had painted me as cold, ambitious, and selfish, the kind of woman who supposedly traded love for success. At first it hurt, a lot. But eventually something inside me clicked. If they were going to tell stories about me, I was going to tell my own version louder. Denise advised caution, but she also agreed that transparency could help reclaim my reputation, as long as I stuck to facts. No emotional rants. No messy online drama. Just truth. So I wrote a post. Not a revenge post. Not a pity post. Just a clear explanation of what happened: betrayal, financial misuse, emotional manipulation, backed by evidence I was legally allowed to share. I didn't insult them. I didn't name-call. I simply told my story from start to finish. Then I hit publish. Within hours, messages flooded in. Friends apologizing for believing rumors. Former coworkers admitting they'd heard distorted versions months earlier. Even acquaintances I barely knew reached out saying my honesty gave them courage to leave toxic relationships of their own. For the first time since everything exploded, I felt in control again. Ethan tried contacting me immediately, furious that I'd ruined his image. The irony almost made me laugh. Chloe sent another long apology, this time admitting they'd exaggerated stories about me to justify their own behavior. I didn't respond to either of them. Silence was my boundary now. Meanwhile, life kept moving forward. I officially moved into a new apartment downtown, smaller, brighter, mine. No shared memories in the walls. No ghost of betrayal lingering in every room. I decorated it with bold colors and art that made me feel alive again. Every piece felt like reclaiming a little part of myself. Work thrived too. My promotion turned into new opportunities, speaking at industry panels, mentoring junior employees, building a reputation based on skill rather than rumor. Even the HR tension around Marcus eased as months passed without drama. We took things slow, learning to separate healing from dependency. One evening after unpacking the last box, I stood alone in my new living room and realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Hurt? Yeah. Changed? Definitely. But the rage that fueled my revenge had softened into something quieter: confidence. Revenge had been my survival instinct. Growth was becoming my new identity. That night I blocked Ethan and Chloe on everything permanently, not out of hatred, but out of closure. Their chapter in my life was officially finished. And as I looked around my apartment, filled with sunlight and silence that finally felt peaceful, I understood something powerful. They didn't just lose me. They lost access to the version of me that tolerated betrayal. Because the woman standing there now? She wasn't anyone's victim. She was just getting started on a life that belonged entirely to her. Life started feeling almost normal again. New apartment, thriving career, no constant anxiety buzzing under my skin. From the outside, it looked like I'd completed my revenge arc and moved on like a boss. But healing isn't linear, and some truths wait quietly until you're strong enough to face them. One of those truths was Marcus. For months he'd been my anchor, the calm voice during chaos, the person who saw my strength when I couldn't. Our relationship grew naturally after the divorce filing, shifting from secret comfort to something real. We'd cook together, explore the city, laugh about ridiculous office drama. He made me feel safe, but safety can sometimes hide questions you're too afraid to ask. One night while we were watching movies at my place, he got a message that changed everything. I didn't snoop, he told me himself. His ex-fiancée had reached out unexpectedly, asking to meet. Apparently their relationship ended abruptly a year before he met me, and there were still unresolved emotions lingering on both sides. My chest tightened instantly. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I realized how much of my identity had quietly attached itself to our relationship. After surviving betrayal, Marcus had become my symbol of hope, proof that good connections existed. The idea of him having unfinished business triggered fears I didn't know were still alive. We talked openly about it. He reassured me there were no romantic intentions, just closure. And logically? I believed him. Emotionally, though, old insecurities whispered that I might just be another rebound, another chapter in someone else's complicated love life. At the same time, my therapist, yes, I finally started therapy, challenged me with a tough question: are you building a new life, or are you building a life around not being alone? That question haunted me for days. I started noticing small things: how quickly I reached for Marcus when I felt lonely, how much validation I sought from his presence. None of it was toxic, but it made me realize I'd jumped from one emotionally intense situation straight into another without fully rediscovering who I was on my own. The truth hit hard. I needed space to understand myself outside of survival mode, outside of revenge, outside of romantic attachment. So one evening, sitting across from Marcus at our favorite diner, I told him everything. My gratitude for his support. My fear of losing myself again. My need to focus on personal growth without leaning too heavily on anyone else. He listened quietly, then smiled gently. I don't want to be your escape, he said. I want to be part of a healthy life you choose, not a life you need to survive. We agreed to slow things down, not breaking up, not disappearing, just creating emotional space to grow individually. Walking home that night felt strangely empowering. For the first time since my marriage fell apart, my decisions weren't fueled by anger or fear, but by self-awareness. And that? That felt like the real beginning of my glow-up. If revenge was the emotional climax of my story, divorce court was the final battlefield, the place where truth stopped being personal drama and became legal reality. Months of planning, documenting, and healing led to one sterile courtroom where my entire marriage would be reduced to facts, timelines, and financial records. I walked in wearing a navy suit instead of black. I didn't want to look like I was mourning, I wanted to look like someone reclaiming control. Ethan was already there with his lawyer, looking exhausted and older than I remembered. Chloe sat a few rows behind him, trying to stay unnoticed, which almost made me laugh considering how loudly she used to exist in my life. For a moment I felt a flicker of old pain, but it disappeared quickly. They were no longer emotional triggers, just people connected to a chapter that was closing. Denise squeezed my shoulder before we started. "Facts over feelings," she whispered. And facts were on my side. The hearing began with financial disclosures. Denise presented bank records showing thousands transferred from our shared accounts to Chloe, labeled as loans but never repaid. Ethan's lawyer tried to argue they were personal gifts, but Denise calmly reminded the court that marital funds required mutual consent. The judge's expression hardened as the timeline unfolded. Then came the recordings, not the dramatic rooftop reveal, but specific audio demonstrating emotional manipulation and long-term deception. Hearing my own voice asking innocent questions months earlier while Ethan lied so casually felt surreal, but instead of breaking me, it reminded me how far I'd come. Ethan finally spoke, claiming he felt emotionally neglected during my career growth. That line would have destroyed me months ago, made me question everything about myself. Now? I saw it clearly for what it was, an attempt to shift blame instead of accepting responsibility. Denise countered with evidence showing my consistent efforts to communicate, plan counseling sessions, and maintain financial stability. Chloe's involvement, the secret meetings, and the coordinated narratives they spread about me painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. By the time closing statements finished, I wasn't angry anymore. I was detached. Calm. Observing a life that used to define me now summarized in legal language. The judge ruled in my favor on several major points: a larger share of marital assets due to financial misuse, protection against defamation claims, and a clean separation agreement without ongoing obligations. It wasn't flashy revenge, it was justice grounded in preparation. Outside the courthouse, Ethan tried to approach me one last time. He looked genuinely regretful, not because he missed me, but because consequences finally felt real. I listened politely, then told him quietly, "I hope you learn from this. But my life doesn't include you anymore." Chloe avoided eye contact completely. As I walked down the courthouse steps into the afternoon sunlight, I realized something powerful. The fight wasn't about proving my worth to them. It was about proving to myself that I could survive betrayal, and come out stronger, smarter, and completely free. After court, I expected some dramatic emotional crash, the kind movies always show when the final chapter ends. Instead, life felt strangely quiet. No urgent lawyer emails. No hidden recordings to collect. No pretending everything was fine while secretly planning an exit. Just space. And at first, that space terrified me. For years I'd been someone's wife, someone's best friend, someone constantly reacting to chaos. Without those roles, I felt like I was standing in an empty room trying to figure out who I actually was. Therapy helped, a lot. My therapist encouraged me to explore things that had nothing to do with relationships or revenge. So I started small. Morning runs along the lakefront. Solo dinners where I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. Weekend classes in photography, something I'd always wanted to try but never prioritized. Slowly, my life stopped revolving around recovery and started revolving around growth. Work became exciting again too. My promotion turned into leadership opportunities one once thought were out of reach. I mentored younger employees, shared my story about resilience, without the messy details, and built a reputation based on strength rather than survival. People didn't see me as the woman whose marriage imploded, they saw me as someone who turned adversity into momentum. Physically, I changed too. Not in some revenge body cliché way, but in subtle shifts: better sleep, healthier routines, confidence in how I carried myself. Friends who hadn't seen me in months kept saying I looked lighter, like a weight had lifted from my shoulders. Even my social life transformed. Instead of toxic circles filled with hidden agendas, I built friendships rooted in honesty and shared interests. Game nights, travel weekends, spontaneous brunches, things that felt simple but genuine. Marcus and I stayed connected but balanced. Our relationship evolved into something mature and supportive without dependency. Some weeks we'd spend more time apart focusing on personal goals, other times we'd reconnect for adventures around the city. There was no pressure, no rushing, just two people growing at their own pace. One afternoon, while editing photos from a solo trip to New York, I realized something shocking. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Ethan. Not at Chloe. Not even at myself for missing red flags earlier. The past felt like a lesson instead of a wound. That didn't mean I forgot what happened. It meant I outgrew it. The real glow-up wasn't revenge, public exposure, or legal victories. It was waking up each day feeling grounded, independent, and genuinely excited about my own life. It was learning that happiness doesn't come from proving others wrong, it comes from building a future that feels authentically yours. And standing there in my apartment surrounded by photos I'd taken myself, I realized the biggest truth of all. The woman they betrayed no longer existed. And the woman I'd become? She didn't need revenge anymore, she was already winning. Just when life finally felt stable, calm mornings, creative weekends, a version of myself I actually liked, my past decided to test whether I'd really changed or if I was just pretending to be healed. It started with a call from an unknown number. Normally I ignore those, but something told me to answer. Ethan's voice came through the line, quieter, almost hesitant. He said he wasn't calling to fight or beg for another chance. He just wanted to apologize properly, without excuses, without blame. Old me would have hung up instantly or let anger take over. New me listened calmly. I didn't comfort him, didn't reopen emotional doors, but I allowed the apology to exist without needing revenge attached to it. When he finished, I simply said, "I hope you grow from what happened. But my life is moving forward without you." And I meant it. A few days later Chloe reached out too, not directly, but through a mutual friend who asked if I'd consider meeting for closure. Apparently she'd lost several friendships after the truth came out and wanted to make things right. For a moment I considered it, not because I missed her, but because part of me wondered if forgiveness required face-to-face conversation. My therapist helped me unpack that urge. Closure doesn't require access, she reminded me. You're allowed to protect your peace without proving your kindness. So I declined politely. No drama. No insults. Just a simple boundary. But the real test came at work. A new client joined our company, and guess who worked on their marketing team? Chloe. Seeing her name on a project email felt like the universe testing my emotional progress. My heart raced for a split second, but instead of panicking, I took a breath and reminded myself that professionalism was my superpower now. When we eventually crossed paths in a meeting, the tension was thick but controlled. She looked nervous, I felt steady. We exchanged polite greetings like strangers who once shared history. No emotional breakdowns. No passive-aggressive comments. Just two adults navigating consequences. After the meeting, Marcus asked if I was okay. I surprised both of us by laughing. I am, I said. Because she doesn't have power over my life anymore. That night I reflected on how far I'd come. Months earlier, a simple text from either of them could ruin my entire day. Now their presence barely shifted my emotional balance. Healing didn't mean forgetting the past, it meant learning that my identity wasn't tied to people who betrayed me. I wasn't the woman chasing revenge anymore. I was the woman choosing peace, without sacrificing strength. And as I sat on my balcony watching city lights flicker on one by one, I realized the biggest transformation wasn't my career, my relationships, or even my independence. It was the quiet confidence of knowing that my story belonged entirely to me, and no one from my past could rewrite it again. If someone told me a year ago that betrayal would eventually lead me to peace instead of bitterness, I would have laughed in their face. Back then my world revolved around revenge, survival, and proving I wasn't the broken one. Now, life felt quieter, fuller, and surprisingly hopeful. The final turning point came during a photography exhibition where one of my pieces was displayed publicly for the first time. It wasn't a dramatic revenge image or something symbolic of heartbreak, it was a simple cityscape at sunrise, taken during one of my solo walks when I was learning how to exist alone again. Standing in that gallery surrounded by strangers admiring my work felt surreal. For once, people were seeing me without any connection to my past relationships. Marcus stood beside me that night, not as a rescuer or rebound, but as a partner who respected the woman I'd become. We'd taken things slow for months, building trust without rushing into emotional dependency. Our relationship grew organically, based on shared growth instead of trauma bonding. There were still challenges, of course, but they felt manageable because I finally understood my own boundaries and needs. Work thrived too. I started mentoring women navigating toxic environments, sharing lessons about self-worth and resilience without turning my experiences into public drama. Hearing others say my strength inspired them felt more meaningful than any revenge moment ever could. One afternoon while reorganizing my apartment, I stumbled across the old box Chloe had dropped off months earlier: photos, bracelets, memories from a friendship that once felt unbreakable. Instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Those experiences shaped me, even if they ended painfully. I kept a few neutral items and donated the rest, closing that chapter without resentment. A few weeks later, I received one final update about Ethan through mutual friends. He'd moved to another city, started therapy, and was focusing on rebuilding his life. Hearing that didn't trigger anger or satisfaction, just indifference. His journey was no longer connected to mine. And that's when it finally clicked. The story I thought was about revenge was actually about transformation. Every betrayal forced me to confront my own boundaries. Every moment of pain pushed me toward independence. Every step away from toxic relationships brought me closer to a version of myself I genuinely respected. On the anniversary of my rooftop reveal, the night that once felt like the climax of my revenge, I woke up early and walked along the lakefront as the sun rose over Chicago. The city felt alive, endless, full of possibilities. I thought about the woman I used to be, loyal to a fault, afraid to set boundaries, desperate to keep everyone happy even at my own expense. She wasn't weak. She was just unfinished. And the woman standing there now? She didn't need revenge, validation, or approval from anyone who once hurt her. She had built a life grounded in self-respect, honest connections, and quiet confidence. My story didn't end with betrayal. It ended, or maybe finally began, with freedom.